Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Writing Approvable CFP Investments and Scopes of Work session of the CFP virtual conference. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, Megan. Your screen is showing your editable PowerPoint versus fully shared.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
get it going. I needed to be able to unmute my mic and things like that. So
Yep.
we can get started then. So before we get started, my name is Megan Kinlock. I am the Title II Director at the AOE, and I also oversee the migrant education program at state level. I've been with the CFP team and the AOE since October of 2019, so I'm fairly new to the team. I'm really excited to present to you today. Hopefully it'll be a helpful review of some information that you already know, and then some expansion of tools that are available to you. So technology stuff, make sure that your microphone is muted. If you have your webcam on, please turn it off. It just helps us with bandwidth, especially for those of us like myself who have a really poor internet connection at home. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat function, and one of my teammates will interrupt me so that I can answer them to the best of my ability. And all of these sessions are going to be recorded and posted to the CFP website. So you all received an email on April 9th that included a list of the different sessions for the virtual conference. That document that was emailed to you with the links to the different sessions, as well as other resources that are going to be at these sessions, are all also available on the CFP website. So if you want to access them, you can go to education.vermont.gov. On the left-hand sidebar, make sure that you click on Student Support, Federal Programs under ESSA, Consolidated Federal Programs, and that'll bring us to our page. And I believe Amber's going to drop a link in just a moment for the document that we're going to look at today. So that you're going to hear me reference today and that are going to be important for the information that we're talking about are the reference documents, the investments. So that's a document that's been around for quite some time. We made a couple tweaks just to reflect a little bit better the current process, as well as the fact that we are moving towards that data category rather than being tied to the SIPs. So some of those pieces are a little bit different. And the program requirements for the school-wide program, since that's pretty complex. If you missed it, Christine did a really great on the school-wide program and how that might be used for your LEA. So that'll be posted. Make sure you check it out. There's a couple templates that we're going to reference. One of them we're going to look at specifically. That's the scope of work template. So Amber is going to share a link for that if you want to check out that document and look at it as we go. There's also the data inventory tool that many of you have probably taken a look at already. And then our allowable use documents. So we have an allowable use document for titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, for McKinney-Vento, for administrative uses of funds, and for parent and family engagement. And that parent and family engagement one is fairly new. So all of these documents, as I said before, can be found on our website. It's also helpful to check the website because you'll know you'll have the most recent version of any of these documents as well. So starting from basics of what a CFP investment is. So there's statements that are made by the LEA, so you, describing in detail what your strategies are going to be for utilizing CFP funds for addressing needs and problems within your LEA. So why do we need them? They identify a data-supported need that your LEA has. They let us know what the strategies are that you're going to use, and they help us determine the approvability of the investments. That's what we're going to this morning, is that approvability piece. So when you're wondering what determines approvability, what do we look at when we get your applications? Investment reasonable? Is the investment necessary? Is the investment allowable? And is the investment applicable? Other important consideration is supplement, not supplant requirements. So I won't go into a great deal of detail about that. There is a document on our website as well that supplement, not supplant, because it is a little bit different for Title I than for the other titles. One thing that I do want to point out that I've seen a few times in the last few weeks with supplement, not supplant, is mentoring funds. It's a great use of Title II funds, but just make sure that what you're asking for is in excess of what is already required by EQS. So when you're wondering what reasonable is, since it's pretty subjective, we get the definition from the Code of Federal Regulations, and they say it is reasonable if, in its nature and amount, it does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under circumstances prevailing at the time the decision was made to incur the cost. Circular A21. So something that's really, really important for us to determine reasonability are details. So without them, it's really difficult for us to tell if what you're asking for is reasonable. If you have a really vague investment that doesn't have a lot of details about what it is you're asking for, it's very likely it's going to get returned and more information will be requested. So part of the purpose of today's session is to let you know what information you need so you can avoid some of that back and forth that nobody likes. Keep in mind that we only have the information that you've provided in the investment description and the attached documentation. And plan ahead to the extent that it's feasible. Placeholders are not allowable anywhere in your CFP application. They never have been. Typically, you don't want TBD in your investments if it's very vague. If you're saying vendor TBD because you're trying to determine exactly how you're going to accomplish the goal and you're following the rules of procurement, that makes sense. But don't give us a very vague investment that just says, you know, I'm going to provide PD, TBD on social emotional learning. That's not really enough information for us. And don't assume that we know anything about your investment strategies or activities, even if it's something that is a buzz in the LEA world. We don't necessarily know everything about it, so give us as much information as you're able to. So what kind of information is helpful for us to know? Context, very, very important. Thinking about how many individuals will participate in a PD activity. You have 2 people doing it or 25 people doing it, because that, again, greatly affects reasonability. Don't auto restart. What supplies are you asking to purchase? So being more specific and just saying supplies. So you want to purchase 25 copies of Jim Knight's Impact Cycle to accompany coaching PD, or do you want to buy 50 flip charts? And if you are looking at travel costs, keeping in mind where you're traveling, give us that information. So if you're going to a conference and you're asking for travel, let us know where the conference is, because you know, travel to and from Albuquerque is going to be a little more costly than travel to and from Stowe. So here's an example of what we would say is vague investment. So this is actually one that I have received, and it's to provide high quality academic instruction, TBD, provide training for supporting students who are struggling. Sounds great. Doesn't really tell us a lot about what it is that you need. So what would we need to make this reasonable and approvable? So in this situation, they're determining the training as TBD. Again, make sure you're following procurement guidelines, but when you write your investment, you have at least a rough idea of what you might be asking for. If you have absolutely no idea what you're asking for, you probably have a placeholder. And when we talk about an investment serves to provide high quality academic instruction, again, it sounds really great, but it's not necessarily defining a specific need. Every school should be trying to provide that high quality instruction. So make sure you're tying that part to your data. Is there a particular academic area that has data supporting a need for improvement in instruction that you want to account? So for example, to improve instructional practices in order to increase proficiency on math assessment. So you're still talking about providing high quality academic instruction, but you're giving us a little more information about what you really need. Again, how many teachers are going to be doing this training? How long is the training? So is this going to be a one-day training, a series of trainings, some ongoing job embedded training, etc.? Remember, when you're using Title II funds, that a one-day, one-off workshop is not going to be allowable. There is the exception during this COVID-19 time that gave us this year's funding, so our current fiscal year, that allows one-off trainings. But looking into the next fiscal year, you want to make sure that you're not just doing a one and done training, that there's some kind of carry forward into the school year and into the work that you're doing. So if we want to take that investment and make it an approvable investment, we'll add a little bit more detail. So again, to improve instructional practices in order to increase proficiency levels on math assessments, they're going to provide 4 half-day trainings during 15 math teachers. So they're not telling us what the vendor is. They're not telling us necessarily what specific area they're going to be targeting for these 4 half-day trainings, just giving us a rough idea of what it is that you plan on doing with that money. So to give you a little bit more real life example of what reasonableness look like, it's a frustrating topic to wrap your head around. So suppose I asked you for $50 for ice, is that going to be reasonable? Again, that really depends. Spend $50 on probably not reasonable. But if I want to spend $50 on ice cream for me and 19 of my friends, that's probably reasonable. Again, details and context are really important. When we get to the necessary piece, what is necessary is based on the data that you have available to you. Think that you need something for your LEA. You want to ask yourself, how do you know that you need it? Typically, you're going to know that you need it based on data. So it can be quantitative data or qualitative data. So it doesn't have to be just assessment data. It can be behavior evaluations that have been done by the administration of the teaching staff. It could be surveys of the teaching staff, of students, of parents, etc. You have a lot of options. Data can be really scary. Even if you are a very data savvy person, it can be really difficult to organize the different types of data from different sources and put that into a usable, comprehensive format. So we developed this tool, the data inventory, intended to be a narrative. So you don't need to describe the data there, and it's not a final product. It is simply a tool to get you where you need to be going. Think of it kind of like a dumping ground for all of your data, so you can look at it in one place and kind of get an idea of the big picture. Keep in mind, the CFP application takes a village. Don't feel that you need to do it all by yourself. Make sure that you are communicating with the folks who manage the data, your LEAs, and let them help you. So with determining necessity, thinking about wants versus need. A broken record here, and remind you that planning your CFP investments, you need to make sure that necessity is backed up by data. Might be if you're saying, well, wouldn't it be nice to do this? Or we'd really like to do this, versus we need to, or we must. If you have an investment that you just really would like to do, but it's not supported by data, unfortunately, that is not approvable. So make sure that you are pulling in some type of data. Again, it doesn't have quantitative data. It can also be qualitative data. So allowable, that's that third bullet point. So it refers to whether or not a particular strategy is permissible based on statute. So that's where we determine what's allowable for the different titles, is by looking directly at the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, reauthorized as ESSA in December of 2015. In addition to statute, the Department of Education federally created non-regulatory guidance for each of the titles as well. So we pull that in, help us determine what we can and cannot do with the funds. So you might have investments that meet the intents and allowability of more than one title, but keep in mind that each title does have its own intents and allowable uses. Again, just to remind, we have those allowable use documents available on the CFP web. We have updated all the title documents on the website. So make sure that if you're using one from a year or so ago, that you are looking at the most recent versions. And if you ever have a question about whether or not something might be an allowable activity, reach out to one of us. Don't be shy. While we can't provide pre-approval for an investment, we can give you guidance on whether or not that activity sounds like it might be usable for the funds. So allocable. Christina had to help me out this one since it's a little difficult to articulate, but Edgar and CFO determines that a cost is allocable to a federal award if the goods or services involved are chargeable or assignable to the federal award or cost objective in accordance with the relative benefit received. So thinking about if the particular investment is necessary to the overall operation of the non-federal entity, which in this case would be your LEA, and that without these funds, the services, activities, et cetera, would not occur. So you want to make sure that you are distributing cost proportionately if you are dividing up costs between a federal award and other funding. So say you have an individual who is 1 FTE interventionist. Maybe she's paid 0.5 by the federal award and 0.5 by local funds. So the federal award's paying for half of their salary. That means that half of this individual's time must be spent on activities related to the intent of the title or funding source being charged. And say this individual needs a computer, you can only allocate 50% of the cost of that computer to the federal award that you're charging because we're paying for 50% of that person's work. And if this needed supplies or materials to do the interventions, 50% would be paid by federal source and 50% by local funds. Basically, the grant can only pay for the portion that benefits the intentions of the funding source. Do we have any questions on that piece yet?
Hi, Megan. So far, so good. Thanks.
Cool. So next, we're going to move into scopes of work, which I know everybody really loves to hear about. We're going to walk through why you need a scope, what a scope of work really needs to include, and a new tool that we have developed, which is the scope of work template. So it might help you a little bit. You get a request from one. So I've got this question when I've asked for a scope of work. What is a scope of work? So for the purposes of the CFP application, it's a document that provides a detailed account of an investment to assist with justifying its approvability. So if we say, I don't know about that, the scope of work is your ability and your place to come back and let us know why you think it's reasonable, necessary, etc. So there's information on what a scope of work is and when it is needed in the Writing Approvable CFP Investments document. And in that document, it states that it must contain the following information: why the activity is necessary, the timeline for this specific activity, the costs associated with the project activities, rationale for exceeding fair market price. So when you need to tell us why you can't stay within the guidelines of fair market price, and the process by which the service outcomes are going to be measured. So that's the language they use. However, a little bit more simply, how are you going to know that your intervention was successful? I also want to remind everybody, scopes of work are not a new requirement. They maybe haven't been followed up due to changes in staffing and some short staffing on our end, but they have been here for many, many years and have been a requirement. So this is not anything that's new with the new staff. So when is a scope of work needed? So you might be asked to produce a scope of work for any investment in order to determine if it meets those 4 criteria of being reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable. However, a scope of work is going to be mandatory anytime an investment exceeds fair market value for the particular strategy or activity in the state of Vermont. So 100% of the time, if you're exceeding that fair market value, you will need to provide a scope of work. But there may be situations where a CFP team member might ask you for one outside of that as well. So commonly, scopes of work are needed to justify consultant fees that exceed the fair market value. So again, it could be required for any other investment whose cost requires some justification as well. If you're attaching a scope of work or any other documentation to support an investment, you must include in the investment description box supporting documentation attached. That lets us know if we are reading something that sounds like it's outside of fair market value, that you're on it. You already handled it. You've uploaded that supporting documentation. So fair market value, according to Edgar, Fair market value is defined as the market price of comparable goods or services in the geographic area. So Vermont, we look at the entire geographic area of Vermont when we determined our fair market value. So one that we really define in that document is the fair market value for external consultants in Vermont. That's a range of $350 to $2,000 a day. Make sure that you note that the total for those consultant fees have to reflect all of the related expenses to that consultant. That includes materials and travel. Make sure that you're not putting those in as separate items to make sure that you're within that $2,000. Those all need to be included in that. If you know already your consultant fees are not going to exceed that fair market value, it's really helpful for us, though not required, if your investment description simply states not to exceed $2,000. That makes it clear to us that we don't need to be looking for a scope of work.
Hey, Megan, it's Jesse.
Sure.
Just you're fading in and out a little bit. The audio is coming through, and it's all clear. It's not disrupting the presentation itself, but you're fading in and out a little bit. I don't know if it's something about positioning or that can be corrected, but just a heads up.
Okay, I'll try to get a little closer. Is this better?
Yep. And occasionally you're having a little lag in the audio and one sentence will run into the next. I think maybe just slowing the pace a little might help to alleviate that.
All right. I'm a fast talker. I'll try.
Oh no, you're doing great. Just something to maybe help with a tech issue.
Sure. So you need a scope of work. Now what? Often if we're asking you for a scope of work, you're probably feeling frustrated, confused, overwhelmed, and like you don't have time for this, because you might not. You might be feeling a little bit like Homer over here. So enter the scope of work template. So we know that you're busy and wearing many, many hats. So we developed an optional scope of work template to make sure that we get all of the necessary information the first. Nobody likes to submit an application and submit documentation only to get it booted back and ask for more information. Try to get everything in there the first time around.
Hi, Megan, it's Jesse. I think we lost you for maybe the last 20 seconds or so. Hi, all, it's Jesse. So Megan's computer restarted, unfortunately. She said it's almost booted up already, which is great news because that means her computer is much, much faster than mine. So just bear with us for maybe another minute or two, and we'll get right back on. Thanks. Just to confirm, is everyone able to hear me that Megan's going to be just another minute? Her computer is rebooting. Great, thanks, guys. The joys of doing this mobily. In the meantime, to kind of keep us moving in a productive direction right now, are there any questions thus far in the presentation? There you go, an electronic template for the scope of work. I believe Amber may have already posted a link. It is up on our website. There, Amber, you're the best. Any other needs or questions right now that I can answer while we wait for Megan's computer to get back up and running? All right, guys. Well, take advantage of the free 30 seconds, and we will be up and going again in just a sec. Oh, Linda, that's a great question. So we don't have a real concrete date other than that it will be very soon. We're wrapping up a couple of technical changes to the application with our vendor, and of course, just testing them to make sure there are no glitches. We're getting allocations loaded and enrollment data all squared away. We're talking days. So we will let you know as soon as it's up and running, but you can anticipate it very, very soon.
All right, I am back. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Welcome back, Megan. That was quick.
Yeah, I like that my computer is like, do you want to restart? I said no. And I'm like, okay, we're going to restart anyway. All right, great. All right, so picking up where we left off, we developed this scope of work template. Again, it is optional. So if you fill out this template in its entirety, so answering all of the sections, that should minimize returned applications for missing or additional information. If you only fill out some of the information requested, it's very likely that that might get booted back to you. So trust us, you don't like returning applications any more than you like getting them back. So let's take a look at this template together. We're going to go through each section one by one so you can see what we'd be looking for. Ask any questions. So it is an electronic document and it's intended to be completed electronically. So you would save it and upload it to your CFP application like you would with any other document. So on our website, it's available to you as a Microsoft Word document, and we do recognize that many schools are Google schools. So it's easily utilized in Google Docs as well. If you are trying to upload a Google Docs file or linking to Google Docs within your scope of work, please note that we are not able to open Google Docs per AOE policy. So if you send them to us that way, unfortunately, we're going to have to return it to you and ask for you to send it in a different format. So when you're uploading any documentation to your CFP application, name your uploaded files to clearly identify the investment that they're supporting. So for example, investment 25, scope of work, .doc. So pretty clear. If we're looking for a scope of work for investment 25, we know that that's the document. Sometimes we'll have 9 or 10 documents attached to the same application and they all have kind of random names. So that means we're downloading and opening 9 different documents to try to find which is the supporting documentation we're looking for. So help us help you there. So this is the template. I know you can't read it. The purpose of this slide is simply to let you know how short it is. It's 2 pages and that's with space provided for you to answer. Obviously, you might need more or less space for different sections, so do with it what you need to do. So we're going to walk through here. Okay, so this part's pretty self-explanatory. So LEA name. If your investment is tied to a particular school, make sure you're putting down that school. If it's not tied to a particular school, so it's just a general LEA-wide investment, you can leave that blank. Make sure you're indicating the number for the investment that you're connecting it to, and whatever title or funding source you're proposing to use for it. So the what section of the template, you're going to let us know what it is you're proposing to do with this investment. This can be simply one. I'm not going to go into great detail here about how you're going to carry out the investment activities. You're going to give that to us later in the document. So some examples of LEA-wide training for all K through 12 teachers in developmental designs. One sentence tells us what you're doing. Consultant to provide content area specific training to teaching teams on MTSS. Training for 9-12 teachers on the creation and use of assessments. And consultant to work with leadership team and assist with the development of a meaningful evaluation and feedback system for teachers. As you can see, they should be very brief and simple. So this why section, this is that why do you need to do this? So tell us why you have chosen this particular strategy and why it is necessary. You want to reference specific data that supports the investment as being necessary. If you get to the why section and you don't have any data to back up the need for that investment, it's probably not going to be approvable because we do need that data supporting what you're doing. So first example of what the why might look like. Behavior referral data shows a sharp increase in behavior referrals over the last 2 years, which we believe indicates that our current model of not sufficient to address the complex academic and social emotional needs of students. After much research, it was decided that developmental designs would be the best fit for addressing the need. So they're referencing that behavior referral data is how they got to this why, and they're referencing why they selected this particular intervention. So they got together, looked at the big picture of what the needs were, and determined what strategy would work best for them. Just another quick example. Teacher surveys have indicated that the current evaluation and feedback system for educator performance is not sufficient to promote ongoing professional growth. The leadership team identified a need for a modernized evaluation system to provide ongoing monitoring of and feedback on educator performance, rather than the current model of a biannual observation and one annual performance evaluation. So again, teacher survey data, that's the specific data that they're referencing, and then walking through why it is that they need that. When we're looking at how, this is how you're going to carry out these activities. So this is literally how you're going to do it. So for example, if you have a combination of methods of delivery, such as a blend of in-person workshops and virtual coaching, you're going to indicate that here. So here's one example of a how. So for that developmental designs one, a consultant will provide 2 in-person full-day workshops on developmental designs to the K-12 teaching staff, along with monthly virtual meetings to each grade level for elementary teachers and to content-specific teams for middle and high school ongoing planning, monitoring, and so you're letting us know, okay, there's going to be a blend of in-person workshops and virtual meetings. And we also get to know how many of those there's going to be. Another example, if we're going back to that evaluation and feedback system, now the leadership team is going to receive 4 full days of planning and development consulting from an expert in teacher evaluation and feedback systems, and then 2 virtual follow-up sessions to reflect on implementation and assist with making changes to evaluation model based on initial feedback and identified needs of teachers. This next section we tried to make as simple as possible so that we don't get information that could end up hurting you in the end. So who's going to participate in this particular activity? Please do not include the names of specific staff members. Keep in mind, in getting as specific as a staff member, if anything changes or you end up using somebody else or putting somebody else in their place for that professional development activity, that's going to not be allowable. So you're going to check the box next to the type of staff that's going to participate in the activity. So you might have more than one box checked. You might have both teachers, principals, and administrators coming. And then you're going to indicate the number of individuals in that particular staff type that are going to participate. As we've said before, you can always be approximate with this, and you can always indicate it as with a number. If you're not entirely sure, err on the side of more participants than less to prevent disallowed costs. So if you say we're going to send 6 people and only 5 go, that's fine. But if you say you're going to send 6 people and 7 people go, that 7th person is not going to be allowable. So this is what the who section might look like after you've filled it out. So you can see the box is checked for teachers, and there's going to be up to 35 teachers participating. The box is checked for principals. That one, they can be specific because maybe they only have 3 principals, and we know that only 1 administrator is coming. So this when piece, you're going to give a little bit more in-depth explanation of the timeline part of the how section. Keep in mind, we do recognize that the application process often takes place long before the full planning of that strategy may have taken place. Now, you could be filling out your application in May for a PD that's not going to happen until January. So give your best approximation of the implementation and consult with individuals and teams involved in the planning of the investment if you need to. So with when, there are two different ways you might want to represent this, and there's no preference on our end, it's whatever works best for you. So the first way would be as a narrative. That's going to be a paragraph describing, okay, there's one full day workshop and a pre-service day in August, one full day workshop in January, and then those ongoing 2-hour after-school virtual meetings with a consultant each month. And then again, there's another example of what that might look like for the leadership team piece. But some people might find a table a lot easier and more comprehensive to represent the data. So it can be as simple as when, what. So all the same information is included here. You might be asking, why are they specifying if it's going to be pre-service or in-service? Why do we care? Because pre-service and in-service are typically going to be included in the teacher's contract. This is a time when you can specify if you're going to be needing beyond contract obligation time for the people who are participating. So if we look at pre-service and in-service and within the confines of the after-school time, we're going to assume that there isn't going to be any BCO. The cost section. You're going to help us understand in this section how you got to that total amount requested for the investment. So just like the when, we understand that you may not know the actual full cost at the time of the CFP application. These figures can be approximated, but they need to be specific enough to provide the information to determine approvability of that particular investment. So what you do want to do, give us the approximate costs for the various elements within that investment and show that the amount you asked for is going to be a relatively accurate depiction of the anticipated costs. Keep in mind that word anticipated. We know things don't always go as planned. That's why we're here doing a virtual conference instead of doing them in person. What you don't want to do is simply restate that total that you entered into the CFP application. So if you asked for $5,000 through the investment, we don't want to see $5,000 listed and completely, that's the only thing given for this cost section. And do not direct us back to the budget details page. This is where you are giving us a little bit more information than even the budget details page might be able to hold. If you get to the cost section and you have absolutely no idea what to fill in here, you got to ask yourself, did you just pick a random number then for what you're asking for this particular investment? And you might want to sit down with your team and think about how you got to that figure. So it's likely that you're going to want to provide a table of some sort to explain the costs. So some people might do a Microsoft Word table. Some people might copy and paste from an Excel sheet. Works for us as long as it's in the document comprehensive way. So this is the information we might be looking for. So they're going to spend $6,000 on those in-person sessions at $3,000 each, and we're specifying that it includes their time, travel, and materials. Then the cost for those virtual sessions and how many they're going to have. So there's 10 groups, they'll each get 8 sessions. So that's a total of 80 sessions at $100 each, where they got $8,000 from. And then materials. Again, especially with Title II, where materials are kind of a gray area, you really want to let us know what materials you're asking for. So specifying, okay, we need this particular book for $20 and we need 35 copies of it. We need another book for $25. We need 30 copies of it. And then sometimes websites will specify what the shipping and handling is going to be, and you can throw that in there as well. When you get to the rationale section, this is your opportunity to let us know why you couldn't stay within fair market price or why you had to exceed that total. This may be very brief. So I'll give you some examples on the next slide that show you how brief that might be. So for example, the desired consultant offers workshops out of state, but the travel costs to send our staff there were greater than the cost to just bring the consultant to us. So maybe we're paying $4,000 a day, but it's a whole lot cheaper than trying to fly 30 staff members out for one of their trainings. The consultant's a well-renowned content area expert. So somebody who really specifically knows what it is that they're talking about, maybe they are the person who pioneered that movement, they're going to cost a little bit more than someone who maybe isn't as much of an expert on the content. Maybe there aren't any comparable consultants available locally. So you looked in your area and there just wasn't anybody around who was on. And sometimes you might simply want to continue the consulting work that you were doing in a previous year that was already approved and exceeds fair value. So letting us know things have been going really great. We want to keep going with that same consultant. And you already told us last year that we were all good.
Hi, Megan, it's Jesse. We've got a question from our audience. Do we leave this blank if we aren't exceeding fair market value?
If you're asked for the scope of work by a team member for fair market value, absolutely, because the rationale kind of ties into the why in that situation. But typically, when we're asking you for this, it's because you exceeded fair market value. So, and you're over that fair market value, you definitely need to fill this out. But there may be other sections too if a team member is asking you for the scope of work that may not be relevant to the particular investment that you're looking at, and you can go through that with the team member who requests it from you. Does that help?
I think that's perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So the success piece is another section that's a little bit confusing and we may not be sure how to answer. So this is a brief description letting us know how you'll know that whatever strategy you're asking for was successful. So how do you know you accomplished what you were looking for? Some examples here. Maybe you to see a 10% decrease in behavior referrals as measured by Swiss data. So one sentence, good enough. All students reaching proficiency in math based on SBAC scores. Granted, we all know all students reaching proficiency might be a lofty goal, but just an example. An increase in staff satisfaction with the frequency of feedback based on the staff survey results. And then this last one, development of an evaluation system that encourages personalized professional learning, planning, and professional growth. That one you might say, well, where's the data piece here? How will they measure it? When the goal here is to simply create something, so in this situation, an evaluation system, the creation of it is the success. You know, you did what you set out to do. You don't want to say that you'll know that it was successful because all 35 staff attended this workshop. Even though that is showing that you completed the goal, it's not really letting us know how it was successful. You're probably saying, I don't want to complete more paperwork. Nobody wants to complete more paperwork. So, like I said, it is mandatory for investments that exceed fair market value, or whenever it's requested. The use of the scope of work template is optional. So it is intended to be a tool that might help you provide us the necessary information. You can always provide us another format of the scope of work if that one, but you want to make sure it still contains all of the same information requested on the template, and it all needs to be in one document. That's a big one. Some things that we've had in the past is simply uploading a course description or printout from a website, or uploading 10 different attachments that all tie into why you want to do this particular investment. Put it all into one document for us and make sure again that you are providing us all the information that we asked for. So in closing here, remember when we're trying to think about approvability, we need to know that it's reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable. When we're looking at scopes of work, they are mandatory for any investment that exceeds fair market value, which again is $2,000 a day maximum for consultants. It can be requested at any time by a CFP team member, and then you can work through what information is needed with that particular CFP team member. And you can use that template or another document for your scope of work, but make sure that it is uploaded to the CFP application and given a file name that clearly indicates which investment it belongs to. So again, investment 25, scope of work. If you're not using the scope of work template, remember that you still need to have it all contained in one single document, and it needs to contain all of the same information that we requested on the template. And remember, we're here to help you. Please don't be shy. Ask us questions. It doesn't bother us. That's what we're here for. We really do want to help you. So help us help you. Let us know what it is that you need to support you better. We really like pressing that approve or accept button on the applications. So.
Hi, Megan. It's Jesse again.
Sure.
Another question from the group in attendance. So based on the examples, scope of work is predominantly to justify 2A investments. Is that correct?
Yes and no. There are PD investments that could fall under Title I and Title IV as well, or school-wide investments. So I wouldn't want to pigeonhole it to Title II, but I'd say a vast majority of scope of works will be to justify a Title II investment. So
just continuing on that, within those three titles, so mostly PD only?
Yeah, because it's right now the only actual numerical figure that we would have for fair market value is consultant work. So PD, consultant work. If there's another situation that a consultant might come into the picture, then it might fall outside of the realm of PD.
Yep, and I'm just, if you're comfortable, I'm going to offer up just a little bit of an explanation because I think I'm able to view the chat and I understand sort of the root of the question. There are times where in other titles, in other sorts of activities, not PD or consultant activities, the team is sort of left wondering exactly what's being asked for. And maybe there's been a couple of rounds of back and forth and the investment's been discussed a little bit. The scope of work might be requested for a different sort of activity by someone in a different funding source to say, hey, let's document sort of what your need is, exactly what the strategy is a little more completely in this secondary document to help us understand exactly why this is reasonable and necessary. So in a lot of Megan's examples, right, this is going to be PD and that fair market value is for consultants. That's what we've got as a distinct, clear threshold. But there may be other times when this document can serve that supplementary information role.
Great, thanks, Jesse. And so any other questions?
Give it a second, but so far so good. Anyone else? Oh, I've got one coming in right now. Let me see. Megan, it says, is there a way we can identify the Title IV spending category? Maybe in the investment language. Oh, okay, so we can clear up. We are clear up front. Okay, so this would be more of a Title IV question, to this individual. Why don't you please send an email to Katie Preston, who is our Title IV lead, and we will discuss that that way. Also, I see, how is the fair market value determined, Megan?
So Jesse or Karen may be able to speak to that. That preceded my time here, and it's something that I believe MC did research on to determine what the going rate was for fair market value in Vermont, but I don't know if either of you has more information on that process.
Yep, I can speak to that a little bit. It was MC Moran. What she did is she spoke with a number of folks she knew in the field, both at the LEA level and who were actually working as consultants, and basically assembled a collection of per day cost. And we saw a range between roughly $350 and $2,000. So based on some local input, both from LEAs and from providers, she was able to come up with what seemed to be the fair market range.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, I am not seeing anything else coming through in the comments right now, Megan.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming today, for listening to this presentation. I hope that you found it helpful. If you come up with any questions afterwards, you can always reach out via email. Calling doesn't really work right now with us working from home, but we're always happy to answer questions.
Oh, Megan, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm here.
I've got one more if you're willing.
Absolutely.
Kind of reading through it right now. Just scan back up here. It says, when we're writing investments, we might not be aware of when PD events will take place, but we know that our staff will attend, especially if they've attended before. How do we make sure our investments include the detailed information without having the dates and locations?
Well, you're gonna do your best approximation. You know, again, we know that nothing is perfect, and you can always contact us, and we can help you work through it. Like I've talked to folks on the phone before and help them work through, and sometimes you might even have a little better idea than you think you do. So you can always call me or email me, and I'd be happy to help you through that, or whichever team member it is that you're working with for an investment.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, if we don't have any more questions, where am I? So again, thank you. I think that's everything for today. Great. So have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah.